So, K-pop has a slight problem with bad English or the severe misuse of English, will make songs borderline unlistenable. I like that K-pop is a blend of two languages for the most part. It can be used very creatively and in very interesting ways. However, the language barriers also causes a lot of interesting problems, such as making songs incredibly cringy for their overuse of slang that is being misused or shoved into a song awkwardly. Why is this such a challenge, knowing that these companies, especially the really big ones, have all the resources to ensure their song lyrics make sense? So without further ado, let's get into it. First, let's get through a disclaimer because there is one thing I want to clarify when I say bad English. So when I say bad English, I don't mean with grammar. Music often requires artists to break grammar conventions. This has been a long practice in Shakespearean's iambic pentameter's creation. This is not to say these K-pop writers and songs are on the same level as Shakespeare, but it is just to say that there's a practice of forfeiting grammar rules to preserve rhythm. So I don't see a reason to judge Korean artists for doing something that English natives always do with their music. If you need to omit a preposition word so your line matches the flow of the music, then that's totally fine. That's not what this video is judging or commentating on. Words on the internet, and especially in pop culture, have very short lifespan. At one point they can be trendy, and a couple of months later it could be seen as cringe. It could lose its original meaning because that's what language is. It's constantly changing and adapting to how it's being used, and this is especially true of slang. So by the time it takes to write and produce and shoot a music video, the slang word used could no longer be seen as cool, but now cringe or have completely changed its meaning. For example, Taemin's Rizz, while initially meaning to have good game at attracting others, it has taken a more ironic meaning as it's been overused, in which most people don't take the word seriously and most use it in a comedic sense. I haven't seen people use it earnestly in a long time. So Taemin using it in a sexy song, which we are supposed to take seriously, is very difficult, especially since that term is now more associated with brain rot content than anything attractive or sultry. This makes it very difficult to take seriously as the word is essentially a joke now, dragging everything down to its level. While this may not have been an issue if the word Rizz was used sparingly in the song, it is repeated throughout the song and it is the title of the song. Therefore, it is completely unavoidable. It's very hard to enjoy the quality of the song without associating with everything negative about its word choice. This is the problem with utilizing very recent or newly popular slang terms, while slang that has been around for much longer has a more established and universal meaning in the public consciousness. It just means that old slang is more inflexible to change. You can have more confidence that the meaning of the word won't change much in the time it takes to create a song around it, and even if it does, the former meaning will still be heavily associated with the old slang term. Meanwhile, newly formed slang doesn't get adopted into the popular zeitgeist long enough to remain relevant, and you end up looking outdated the minute your song comes out, or you use it before the slang term cements itself into popular culture and finds its definition, and you end up using it incorrectly. The thing about slang is that it doesn't matter what it was initially intended for. Rather, what's more important is what the majority want the word to mean. You must be very careful when using slang so you don't look lame, which in the internet is considered a cardinal sin. So from my experience as someone who talks in my day-to-day life, as I'm sure most of you do, I use slang sparingly. It's more about adding flavor or garnishing my speech than the main dish itself. It can start to become repetitive and forced, and when things become forced, then they become inauthentic. I don't come to K-pop for authenticity. I'm pleasantly surprised when it's there, but that's not something I expect from every group. I'm very aware that these are created idols who have varying, if any, control over their art. And while I know some idols are more in control of their art than others, I don't expect that from all of them. So I reserve some suspension of disbelief. Like, sure, I believe you've got ops, 100%, but don't test how far my suspension goes. Also, the overuse or abundance of slang term feels more like a checklist than a song. It becomes difficult to ignore once you notice the string of forced slang. It's like the song is trying to prove a point on something I wasn't arguing with them on. But now I might have to ask some questions. Like, what are you trying to prove? Who are you trying to mimic? Because I know this is not part of your daily lexicon, most likely. This is my problem with the new YG and Black Label new girl groups. So basically it's just Meow and Babymonster who drench their songs in slang terms. This is also because their songs now use more English, whereas in previous generations and in different groups, they have more Korean. So any slang used in those songs can fall under the radar. However, with these two groups, it's pretty unavoidable. I understand why they're using slang since these two groups are heavily influenced by hip-hop. However, hip-hop is creating slang, not just using whatever is trendy. This is unfortunately the feel of these songs, that they're trying to cram as many trendy slang terms to seem edgier and more credible as a hip-hop group, but instead they just sound awkward. The problem with overusing slang is that more you use it, the less cool it sounds. The novelty wears out fast, so repeating it in multiple times in a song, rather than making you look like you're part of the in-crowd, the group sounds annoying and cringe. It's just the nature of language. The acceleration of cultural relevance for slang term is quick, and its eventual death into popular geist is unforgiving. Overuse is not just reserved for slang, it can also be said about idioms. This is especially true of English releases in which they will use every cliche and overdone phrase. This not only demonstrates a lack of creativity because come on, you couldn't have come up with your own phrase. Creativity is a prerequisite to making art, unfortunately. Or fortunately. It also is just very boring. I don't want to hear a common expression, but now in another song, especially if you have nothing new or interesting to say about it. That disappoints me if you're just using it out of laziness or familiarity, especially if I like the group. I expect more. I understand that it's hard to create comparisons, metaphors, or similes, but that's just what's expected of the job. Get better writers if this is too hard for them. And I also understand that this is especially hard in a language you are not native speaker of, but I still feel this is a reasonable expectations for artists to have. I don't mind using cliches, especially subversions or new twists, but only sparingly. Much like slang, I have no problem with overdone idioms if they're used rarely. If you rely on cliches for multiple songs and multiple lines of the same song, there might be a slight problem here. I don't want to hear someone else's words that they've used in the past. I want to hear something new, and at this point, I feel like this is more used as a clutch rather than an interesting creative choice. The first example that came to mind was BTS's English releases that they were releasing during 2020 to 2022, as in before they started to leave for military service, and these songs were filled with cliches, and I did not appreciate that. I think BTS are very creative when it comes to writing, and they have a lot of writing talent in that group, and I wish they found someone who could match their creativity in English. Personally, I did enjoy Butter, but I thought using cliches was endearing in a cheesy way in that song. However, Dynamite and Permission to Dance were a lot less charming for me. They were not enjoyable at all. It sounds like something AI could conduct because it's just regurgitating someone else's ideas and recycling them for a new song. They lack a certain originality and end up sounding generic. They sound like songs used for radio playbait, which is not great and is not what I'm looking for when I listen to BTS.
So the misuse of English. So I don't want to be too hard on this because I'm kind of hypocritical in the sense where I will like one song even though it misuses English a lot and then dislike another song for the same reason. So it's a bit complicated, my feelings on this particular topic, but there are just some examples of where there's the most egregious use of English. And I do think this is what fans find the most unforgiving, as they won't let the artist down for having terrible English in their songs, especially if it's very, very, very bad. And I get it. It's pretty easy to make fun of this mistake. It encompasses everything wrong with slang used in K-pop songs, or slang used wrongly in K-pop songs. First, it can be disrespectful, especially if it's very new slang and it's being misused in a context that's completely different from what it's supposed to be doing, completely changing its meaning and completely erasing the history behind it. And the reason why this is so terrible is because there is a way this could be completely avoided, and it's simply having someone native to the language and native to the culture it comes from just being a part of the process of making the music. And you don't even have to learn it, you just have to hire someone who is intimately aware of the language being used and the culture that it's being borrowed from. That would be even better. And you know, these big companies, they have all the resources in the world to do this. They just don't think it's worth it. But considering the music quality, it absolutely is worth it. Besides being disrespectful, it just sounds bad. It's like you know something is off the minute you hear it. It's a jarring experience when you know how the word is supposed to be used, but someone completely butchers it. Typically, these are English releases, and they are made for English speakers. However, they're done by butchering English words, which completely makes no sense. The older K-pop days when it was not being made for English speaker audience, or was made without the awareness of English listeners tapping into Korean music, it makes sense why the butchering of English words was more acceptable. But now with this larger audience that does speak English, and with this greater awareness of English speakers as a primary audience or secondary audience, there needs to be a bit more prioritization in getting the words used correctly, because this is a very strange method of garnering a large Western audience by butchering the language. It simply worsens the listening experience when words aren't correctly used, and it's not being done in an ironic way. If the song is supposed to be comedic or jokey, then obviously misusing the term can be a gimmick. However, if you want me to take the song seriously, you have to be serious in your work. If you don't know how a word is used or how to put it into a sentence, then it's safe to say just don't use it. One of the things I learned when I was learning a new language is don't use words you don't know the meaning of, because you will end up looking like a fool. I feel that's the best way to avoid these sort of problems and to make a great listening experience. Ultimately, the bad English in K-pop doesn't always bother me enough to stop me from listening to a song. In fact, it's not really a big deal, I say, despite making an entire video about it. There are some cases in which I dislike it, but for the most part, I can ignore it and also understand that this is part of K-pop's charm. It's this blend of different cultures and languages, kind of blending in awkwardly, but still in a very charming way, which attracts a lot of people, including me. However, I do think it's strange how often English is butchered in K-pop, and I wouldn't even mention it if it wasn't such an easy thing to remedy. Having someone who is fluent in the language review and correct the English in a song shouldn't be too much to ask for, considering how many companies do have resources for this. I mean, they have English speakers in their groups already. I don't see how it'd be hard to have a professional English songwriter fixing and tuning up some of the changes they made to the song. I mean, they already have English producers and songwriters that make the demos. I don't see how they can come back just to fine-tune some of the changes. The access to fluent English speakers who are professional in this field should be fairly easy. This just feels like a problem that shouldn't exist. With that being said, thanks for watching. I know it's been a long time since I posted, and can't wait till next time.